Welcome back to Geek Channel 8. I'm Eric.
And I'm Rosie. The Boys was just released, and so was House of the Dragon. So we are watching that at my house. It's a whole thing. When the premiere comes out, we make sure we have our beverages and our smoky treats, and we gather in the living room and get comfy and watch the shows. Yeah, The Boys just never ceases to amaze me with there are no boundaries on that show. There are no
Yeah,
boundaries. I think the only thing stopping it is just I think they go right up to barely getting an X rating. That's like how far they go.
well, I mean, that's how the comic was or is or
Mhm.
something. I haven't read a whole bunch of the comic. I want to, and once I've read the comic, then I'll watch the show. No, that's significantly not classy enough for what we're doing today.
Yeah, yeah, no pickies out on that one. But the House of the Dragon so far is really good. Really been enjoying that. Of course, I love, Game of Thrones. I love that whole genre, but I'm really glad that they came out with the House of the Dragon series because it's just been phenomenal so long and we waited way too long for season 2. So I'm glad it's
Is it
finally here.
really Game of Thrones good?
It is really Game of Thrones good. I mean,
Season 7 Game of Thrones good or like Game of Thrones good?
it's only in its second season, so I feel like time will tell on that. But so far, when it comes to like, you see more dragons, obviously, because there were more dragons during this period. So you get a lot of that aspect of special effect. And then you also have the whole storyline and of course the disturbing uh the disturbing like relationship with the uncle and his niece which is like ew cringe. And I don't know, it's just interesting because it's more centered around one character as compared to many, a woman nonetheless. It's a different journey, I'll say that. It's a different journey. It's not better, it's not worse, it's a different journey. I feel like maybe it might be a little slow for some people, but it's just right for me because when it comes to like all of these different families and trying to catch on to all the different names of all the different characters, I'd rather it start out slow or have a slower introduction of the characters so I get a chance to get to know them first so I can understand what the hell's going on.
I have to ask, was there any like incest in House of the Dragon?
Yeah, yeah. One of the main relationships is an uncle and his niece,
Okay.
and they
So
have children together
so you watched The
eventually.
Boys and
Yeah.
House of the Dragon, which in order before we class it up here, I'll say that I'm not all the way down there.
Mm.
I started watching MILF Manor.
Nice. I should live there, but it's fine.
Well, before you say that,
I'm just kidding.
have you seen an episode of MILF
No,
Manor?
no, I just hear MILF and I have to joke around about that, just because I'm a mom and it's the joke is so there.
You might change your mind when you hear this. So like I watched
I'm sure I will.
an episode and there's this, like a lot of reality TV shows, there's like this house they have to stay in and it's filled with the MILFs. And then the it's like I guess like I don't watch a lot of reality TV, but like The Bachelor or one of those where they're trying to hook up. I don't know if they're trying to date or hook up or whatever, but they're trying to meet someone, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, not my bag.
The people that they're trying to meet, they the big reveal is it's their sons.
Ew.
So so you see why I asked about
How is
House of
that
Dragon
classing
because
it
I've got
up?
he's out. Um
Piggy's out.
so wait a minute. Now, what's that dude that had the Catch a Predator show, like Chris something?
Chris Hansen.
Chris Hansen. Yeah. So I was expecting him to show up at any moment because one of the challenges they had. So for in order for the MILFs to get the suite, where they could get it on with one of the other MILFs' sons, I guess they had to be blindfolded,
Mhm.
and all their sons are in, like, swim trunks and shirtless, and the MILFs had to feel the sons, and if they could identify their own son by feeling him up, then they could, like, they could they won, and they got to sleep in or they got, use of the Uber special suite.
Ew. Ew. Just so much cringe. So much cringe.
Yet
That's
you watch House of the Dragon,
Yeah,
which
but
is
that's
full of its
reality television. You're watching reality television. People are really putting mothers and sons in this position, and that's gross. Oh my god. Oh my god. I just can't,
I
like, I
I
can't.
think the mothers and sons put themselves in that, position themselves, but
Yeah, like, that just shows where we are as a society at this point that we're willing to do that kind of shit for entertainment. I mean, I just can't. I
I'm probably
can't.
not gonna watch the rest of the series, but it was unless I'm really feeling like watching a train wreck, at some point I might. So supposedly they're already in their second season, so supposedly it gets even worse in the second season, but
I just
I don't know why, but, like, it's on HBO Max or Max now, and it just kept, like, advertising it to me like, "You must watch MILF Manor." I'm like, "Okay, fine. The only reason I have this is for the movies, but I'll watch some of your reality TV to see why we have to pay more money to have all this on here."
Right. Oh
And
my gosh. Yeah. I don't know. That's wow. I just can't. That's so fun.
today is gonna be one of those days where we mispronounce everything, so I'm gonna start at the beginning by mispronouncing the title of the film. We are doing, from 1989, Boris Godunov. So today's movie, Boris Godunov, is a opera. We've already done a ballet, but we have
Mm,
not yet done an opera. So I thought it was time that we did an opera. It is also set in 1874, which is our current running theme here, but it's pretty different from Anna Karenina. So the film itself came out in 1989. It was a joint French, Spanish, and Yugoslavian production back when there was a Yugoslavia.
mhm.
And it's based on a Musorgsky opera that was originally done by the National Symphony Orchestra in Washington, D.C., conducted by, and I'm gonna mispronounce things all day here, Mstislav Rostropovich. Then that was recorded, and the producer wanted to do a film version of it. And he originally had tapped the pretty distinguished Polish director Andrzej Wajda to do it, but he didn't want to do it, or he backed out of it. And they offered it to the director Andrzej Zwalski. Probably murdered that name, but anyway, they had a budget of $7 million, and he had his own view of how it should be done. So he had some of the original performers, Ruggero Raimondi,
Raimondi?
yeah,
Mhm.
Romuald Tesarowicz, and Kenneth Rigel, and then Everybody else was different. Now, what he did staging wise is to present it as a theatrical performance within the film. So, much like we saw with Anna Karenina, which was a play inside a film, this is kind of like a play inside of a film or a film inside of a play, whatever. I'm not sure which. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So he only used about 2.5 hours of it. They had 3.5 hours worth of opera. So it cut out an entire hour, which, would you have liked it more coherent or longer?
More coherent, but okay.
And he reordered the sequence of some of the scenes and stuff like that. We'll get into why he did that and what that was all about. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about what was going on in 1989.
1989 was kind of a tumultuous year. For Yugoslavia, it was really the beginning of the breakup of Yugoslavia. You can even find a series of maps online of the breakup of Yugoslavia and the subsequent developments. But yeah, it was a product of the Cold War. It was established in 1945. So rest in peace, Yugoslavia. In Spain, on October 19th, a fire broke out in one of the nuclear plant's generators, killing 31 employees and firefighters and exposing 130,000 people to radiation. The general election took place in October. The University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria was established. In France, two women, Natalie Ménagnon and Joëlle Aubron, both members of the left-wing extremist group Action Direct, are found guilty of murdering Renault owner George Bessy, who was shot dead in Paris, November of 1986. They had municipal elections that year, and there was also the European Parliament election. France celebrated the 200th anniversary of the French Revolution. The 15th G7 summit was held at the Grand Arch in Paris. And there was something else. Oh, yeah. In March, I thought this was interesting. The glass pyramids designed by Chinese American artist I.M. Pei were unveiled at the entrance of the Louvre in Paris.
The Louvre.
The Louvre. Thank you. My French is
Hmm.
awful. I'm just don't even ever ask me to read it. I can read Spanish all day, but not French. So there you go. Those were some events that happened in Yugoslavia, Spain, and France in 1989.
Okay. As we've sort of hinted at, this thing was hard to follow. So I'm going to give like a super, super, super brief synopsis of what I think happened. And then we'll go into talking about it. It opens with Tsar Boris Fyodorovich, his coronation on the death of the old Tsar. Then it cuts away to another place, like a monastery, where Pimen, the monk, reveals that Boris was involved in the murder of the rightful heir to the throne. His protege, Grigory, decides to impersonate the assassinated Dmitri, who is the rightful heir, and goes to Lithuania to gain support and followers. He eventually makes his way to Poland, marries a Polish princess, Marina, and then comes back to try to retake the throne, although he is also a pretender to the throne. So you got basically two people fighting who neither of whom are the rightful heir. Meanwhile, the people are starving and all of that's going on. So that's basically the plot, as near as I can tell. This was another film opening as a play or opera. It's kind of interesting because Mussorgsky is a character that comes down and sits down to watch this play at the beginning. But it breaks fourth wall, and not only do you see it's a play, sometimes you see that it's a film as well, because you can see the camera crew, the lights in a lot of scenes, things like that. Why do you think that happened?
I feel like they were kind of doing the same thing that they were doing in Anna Karenina, where they, it was like a stage play. Well, in this case, this is an opera and it's on film, and they show people on set, like filming. And I don't know if they kinda did that to, like, draw you back into reality so you could see the story from a different place. I'm not quite sure what the point was, but either way, I still didn't understand the story. But that was my theory.
Okay. I thought that they did it because politics in the Soviet Union and in all of the Eastern Bloc, like Yugoslavia, is a tricky thing. The revolution overthrew the czars, but then you also can't be critical of Russian history. My original theory was they were like trying to say, hey, this is just a movie, don't throw us in jail.
Oh. Don't send us to Siberia.
Yeah,
Okay. It's just a movie. We're having fun.
some critics believe that it was specifically a criticism on communism and that breaking fourth wall to show that it was like actually in modern times was being like, see, this is what's going on right now. I don't know.
I'm not sure either. One thing that kind of disturbed me was when they were showing the funeral procession of the previous czar, and they had all of these people carrying icons. I don't know what they were doing. Like, I don't know if this is a funeral or they were celebrating that the czar died, but the children were carrying icons that had little shelves on them, and you could see body parts, like hands and arms and things. Did you notice that? What is that about? Like, why do they have children carrying severed hands in front, like on the same thing as an icon? Like, what is the significance of that?
I either didn't notice it or noticed it and just didn't pay attention, was like, okay.
Yeah, it was part of the chaos, and I noted it because I was like, "That's weird. You don't see that very often. So what's that about?"
I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of Russian funerary custom. The sets and costumes were amazing. It was big. It was definitely epic big with castles and lots of people, which brings up another thing I wanted to make mention is that this is about royalty, right? This is the czar. It looks very medieval, like their
Mhm.
the dress and all of that. But this takes place in the exact same year as Anna Karenina, and that one they look much more like, to put it in Western terms, they look much more like Victorian or, much more modern, is much more Regency or flowy gowns and stuff like that. And this was like more medieval. Now, Anna Karenina took place primarily in St. Petersburg, although there was some of other places like Moscow. This takes place primarily in Moscow. And you got the feeling that there were starving people and stuff in Anna Karenina, but you didn't see them. And in this one, you did see them. What you didn't see was the kind of opulence of St. Petersburg in this. It was like this was a lot rougher. It was like comparing a medieval thing to a Renaissance thing, or later.
Mhm. Mhm.
It was very strange. I don't know which is more accurate to 1870s Russia.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting too. And I never thought I would see nudity in an opera before, and there was a lot of it.
Yeah, there was a lot of gore and there was a lot of nudity.
Yeah.
This is not your typical opera, I think. There was like practically orgies.
I know. It was weird. There were a couple of rapey scenes in there too, like L'Aubergiste, which was the first woman that he came across. I don't even know what her role was. Like, was she like a working girl? Was she like a barmaid working girl? Like, I'm not sure what happened, but Grigory hooked up with her. But then right after he hooked up with her and like some chaos happened, like this guy like grabbed her and they showed him like violating her and she's like looks surprised and I couldn't with that. And then even Marina, she had a rapey scene too. Like I'm like, yeah, Russia must not like their women too much.
She had a
Just
rapey scene with whom? With the fake Dmitri?
yeah, I think it was the fake Dimitri.
Because I thought she was into him. She was like totally like I got the feeling she was like a gold digger, like trying to get him so that she could become like the Russian Tsarina.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. But again, there was a lot in that film that I didn't understand. It was lost in translation and it didn't make sense.
One thing I probably should have mentioned is this has been adapted to the screen a whole lot of times, like a lot
Mm,
of times. And there were multiple versions of this in the 80s alone. And I think part of it is that there are two different Boris Godunovs. There's an opera by Mussorgsky, and there is
mhm.
a play by Alexander Pushkin.
Okay.
There's probably differences between the two of those. This film tried to be based on both of them. So, I don't know, that may have
Oh.
added to the confusion. I don't know. I find opera hard to follow anyway. Ballet, a lot of stuff is just told through the dance, so the words aren't as important,
Mhm.
whereas with an opera, it is. It's all
Right.
told through the singing. So,
Yeah, and like up until now, and I hate to even say this because I actually really enjoyed it when I was a kid, but every year the music teacher would take she would do this for the 5th graders and the 6th graders. She would take us to a symphony and then she would take us to an opera. And one year we saw The Barber of Seville, and then one year we saw Aida, which was amazing.
yeah, they took us to see Carmen.
Okay.
The most interesting thing about it to me was basically, I think they let kids come to the dress rehearsal so that they don't
Mhm.
have to like, since they're going to be performing it anyway, because it wasn't like open to the general public. It's just the, school kids. What was interesting to me is because of that, they didn't even bother to close the curtain between sets. So I got to see like the stage crew tearing it down and setting up the new set, like in between acts and all of that. And I was like, okay, that's cool.
Mhm. Seeds were planted that day.
Probably, yes. Seeds were planted if our listeners know what I do for a living.
There's that couple that's in bed together and the dad walks in and lays down. Like another one where I'm scratching my head, like, what is this even about? Why is he in their bed with them? That's weird to me.
And you have an issue with MILF Manor.
Yeah. Well, that was a weird one too. I didn't understand.
Let's just say not everybody's on the same page about this because there was a big controversy in Paris over this. Remember, it
Mhm.
was a joint Parisian Yugoslavian Spanish production,
Mhm.
and the conductor actually sued the director.
Really?
Yeah, because of liberties taken with it and demanded that he remove certain visual and sound elements from the film. The Parisian courts, the judgment was yes, but that what they were going to make him do instead was insert an announcement in the beginning of the film saying that the conductor Rostropovich disapproved of the film version, but allowed him to keep the sounds and images in, saying that that's like basically, that is up to the director of a film. So, yeah, this was actually a court case in like 1990.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. One of the best reviews I saw about this was Jacques Sislier for Le Monde, which is the world, said that, quote, it's impossible to talk here about film opera in a merely illustrative sense.
Mhm.
One should let yourself be carried by the admirable cinematic work, confirming, as if it was necessary, the Shakespearean temperament of the author of notable works of the French cinema of the recent years. Not brief in his words of praise question mark of this film. It sounds kind of like he's like, don't try to figure it out, just go with it.
Just go with it.
And that was kind of my approach to this film. I was like, I'm not going to even try to figure out what's going on. I'm just going to go with it and be like, look at the visuals and all that stuff. And then The one thing that I noticed beyond everything else is that at the end, the victors ride off into the woods or whatever across the land with red banners, you know?
Mhm.
Now red is part of was part of the Russian flag, but it then of course became the color of the Soviet Union
Right.
and communism in general. And so it was, I think that was the moment I was like, "Oh, yeah, they're definitely trying to make some statement about communism here."
I don't know. I have more questions than answers about this movie, but there was one scene where Grigory was almost caught and he goes to cut a wart off of his nose and then
Yes.
like eventually disappears. So I want to know what happened to turn him into this weird ghosty character that he turned into with white eyes and white hair.
Oh, I think that was a different person.
Played by the same character because it looked like the same guy.
It might have been played by the same guy,
Okay.
but I think that was a different character.
Okay.
I thought that was a different person. That was like a blind guy who gets his sight back or something. I forget now. Fans of this opera are probably screaming at us right now.
Yeah, they're like, "How dare you review this?"
I think he was like blind, but then something caused him to regain his vision or lose his vision again.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just another unanswered question.
Yeah, if you guys know the answer to that, write in and tell us because we couldn't figure it out. I think I knew what was going on at the time, or I thought I did, but I can't in hindsight remember. The main thing that struck me is just how different everything seemed from Anna Karenina, which is supposed to be literally the same year.
Right. Right. It seems like Russia was like 50 years behind everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other movie was like also Russia. So,
Mhm.
I don't
Like
know.
whatever part of Russia they were in. Yeah, it didn't even look like the same age. It didn't look like the Gilded
Like there were
Age.
trains and stuff in the other one,
Yeah.
and this one it's like the only transportation I saw was horses.
Right. Same.
I don't think I even saw carriages in this. It was just like horseback. So I did see online, just as we were talking, that the actual historical Boris Godunov became the de facto regent in 1584
Okay.
during the reign of Ivan the Terrible. So that is the Middle Ages. So this was set in 1874, but is actually like about a person who lived in 1584.
I'm all
Um,
kinds of confused now. Now I'm stuck in a vortex of space and time. Great.
yeah, but you did understand the cutting the thing off of his face part, right?
Yeah, because he was trying to disguise himself like he was a wanted man. And
Right.
so, people showed up looking for him and he's like, it isn't me. I don't have a wart on my nose. It isn't me. I'm not the one."
Yeah. Well, here's the historical basis of the play. Allegedly,
Allegedly.
this is from Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt, but
Mhm.
it precedes the Romanov dynasty, which started in 1613, and it's about the time of troubles, the period of relative anarchy following the end of the Rurik dynasty in 1598. What they say is in 1584, Ivan the Fourth, which is Ivan the Terrible, the first Grand Prince of Muscovy to use the title Tsar, died, and his successor was supposed to be his feeble son Fyodor the First,
Okay.
but he was more into religion and left affairs of the state to his brother in law, Boris Godunov. And then in 1591, Ivan's other son, Dmitri, died under mysterious circumstances. And Godunov ordered a investigation, and it determined that Tsarevich, while playing with a knife, had an epileptic seizure, fell, and died of a self-inflicted wound to the throat. Now that sounds
Okay.
really, really suspect to me.
Yeah. Whole bunch of quotation marks going on in that statement.
Dimitri's mother, Maria Nagaya, who was exiled with him, claims that he was assassinated. And then rumors were that Boris was linked to the crime. At least the rumors supposedly circulated by his enemies.
Okay.
In 1598, Tsar Fyodor died, and he's the last representative of the Uric dynasty that had ruled for 7 centuries. And then, so the sort of Patriarch Job of Moscow, who I guess must be like a mayor or something, nominated Boris to succeed Fyodor the First as Tsar, despite his rumored involvement with the murder of Dmitri. He agreed to ascend to the throne only if elected by the Zemsky Sobor, which is some sort of parliament of, nobles or something. They did nominate him unanimously, and he was crowned in that year, 1598. And then fast forward a few years to 1604, there was a pretender to the throne that claimed to be Tsarevich Dmitri, but believed to be the false Dmitry Grigory Otrepyev.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm bothering to go through this history, because I'm murdering these Russian names, and like anyone that's interested in this is like going to be like, "Oh, I can't listen to this." And anyone that is not interested in this is not probably not going to be listening to us or has tuned out by now. But anyway, this pretender got the support of the Polish aristocracy,
Okay.
and with a force of arms, soldiers, he marched to Moscow. They ultimately were unsuccessful in taking over. In 1605, Boris died of unknown causes and was succeeded by his son Fyodor, which is aka Fyodor the Second, and that gave the false Dmitri a second chance. And so he goes to Moscow with a bunch of boyars, who are, I guess, Russian nobles, backing him to murder Fyodor the Second and his mother. In 1606, false Dmitri the First is murdered and succeeded by Vasily Shoisky, who is Vasily the Fourth. And then only 4 years later, Vasily the Fourth was deposed and died 2 years later in a Polish prison. Another pretender claiming to be Dmitry Ivanovich, false Dmitry the Second, is murdered. In 1612, a third pretender, false Dmitry the Third, was captured and executed. And then 1613, the time of troubles comes to an end when Mikhail Romanov, son of Fyodor Romanov, who had been persecuted under Boris Godunov's reign, succeeds to the tsardom and starts the Romanov dynasty. And it is a matter of debate to this day as to whether or not Boris was responsible for Dmitri's death or not.
I just came across an interesting article in Opera Wire, and they talk about this film. And one of the things that they pointed out was Poland was steeped in the destructive ideology until the fall of 1989. The same year, the Berlin Wall fell after the revolutionary period known as the Autumn of Nations, effectively forcing East Germans to capitulate. Thus, the film inadvertently becomes a premonitory symbol of the consequences of the abuse of power, the corruption of the soul, and the inevitable destruction of those in undeserved power. It reads as poetic justice. That's straight out of the article. So, Opera Wire, it was an article that came out June 9th of 2022. So people are still talking about this movie, and it's a pretty lengthy article. So, check it out.
I apologize to any Russians that might be listening to this.
As do I.
I apologize to any Polish people or Yugoslavian people, any French people, and any opera lovers in general.
As do I.
We we basically massacred this.
Complete massacre.
This was the Troubles. This was the rough period of anarchy while we're trying to get back together on 1874.
That's right.
Please feel free to inform us what we got amazingly wrong or what we need to know or totally missed or glossed over in this, because I'm sure there's a lot. You can write to us at GC8 podcast. That's letter G, letter C, number 8 podcast at gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. We have a group there, the Geek Channel 8 fan page. It's a private group because Facebook sucks, but just send a request and we'll add you. We also are trying to get everybody to introduce this podcast to 2 people. So it is summer vacation time. If you are going on a road trip and there's going to be other people in the car with you, download all of our episodes to play on the trip, the road trip,
That's right.
to introduce hopefully multiple people in your car to this podcast.
There you go. There's your road trip assignment. Straight out of Geek Channel 8. Also, like our Facebook page, join in the discussion in our Facebook groups. We always have some interesting posts in there.
Okay. Until next time, this is Eric.
And this is Rosie.
Signing off.
Which is not what happened during this movie, Eric. That is 2 hours of my life I will not get back. I'm just telling you right now. Like, I'm